Good evening, or maybe good afternoon for all who are there present. We'll start directly to have benefit of full time with J Tenzin. Everything that has a beginning has an end. Be at peace with this truth, and all will be well. This is what they said in Buddhism. And this is the end of our long and beautiful series of interviews with J Tenzin Palmo. I may have abused her kindness and benevolence because every time she said, "Let's stop," I felt that I was losing something of myself, and how happy I was when she agreed to continue these interviews. Many times, J Tenzin repeated in these talks and even before, "You have to test the Guru for 12 years. From my side, I can say that I tested mine for 12 long interviews. How many times just watching her respond to my questions, I got my answer. And how many times I, as a teacher of Buddhism in several universities, felt when listening to her how little our theoretical knowledge appears in front of those who have experience. And now, before we part, I remember Milarepa's attitude when he left his Guru Marpa's house and started to live alone in a cave. He then said, "Now I can start to be finally continuously with my Guru." He realized at that moment that it is rather the practice that makes him in a state of continuous presence towards his Guru. For me, and for all those who have followed this long series of interviews, we have all had enough advice and guidance that it is now rather a matter of putting it into practice in our daily life and our spiritual path. Welcome, J Tenzin, for our 12th and last interview. We'll start directly after this introduction by our regular questions. We continue and finish aujourd'hui questions about the third and last book, this one, Commentaries on Meditation. J Tenzin, speaking of the great defects and obstacles due to the I or me, you say in page 127, you said, in Buddhism, the three poisons, means ignorance, anger, and greed, are all based on the belief in a solid I. And my question yet, this solid self is the great difference between Buddhism and other religions. Even Hinduism believes in an Atman, a certain me, which continues to exist after death. It is a mere mental creation and some kind of attachment to our ego to say that it has some continuation after this, my question?
So I would say, Lwiis, that when the Hindus talk about Atman, that is not the ego, right? In fact, in all major spiritual paths, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, as well as Buddhism, they recognize that the ultimate truth, our innate divine wisdom and love, is within us, but obscured by the small self or the ego. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I am hearing you.
Okay. This sense of a solid, unchanging me, you know, at the center of our consciousness is a me versus others. And that is a conceptual thinking mind. That is a dualistic way of thinking, right? So the spiritual path, right, is often one of surrender to the divine by whatever name. I mean, our ultimate nature is beyond thought, our conceptual thinking mind, and it's beyond ordinary language. It cannot be described. But losing this small I in order to open up into our full limitless potential is, I think, inherent in all genuine spiritual paths. The Buddha sometimes called this the deathless or the unconditioned, right? So in the meantime, our ordinary consciousness, our conceptual thinking mind, which thinks I, continues life after life like a river, but that's changing moment to moment. So like a river is changing moment to moment. We say it's the same river, but actually everything in it is changing. And, you know, think of it, you wouldn't even recognize yourself in your past incarnation if you met them. And you have no idea what your next rebirth is going to be, right? It's not who you think right now is me, right? It's not Dr. Lwiis Saliba. It will be somebody completely different, maybe a different gender, may not even be human. So like an actor plays Hamlet tonight and tomorrow he plays Macbeth, right? But they're just roles. They're not his true nature. So our true nature interconnects us with all beings. The sense of a solid I separates us, makes it me and other. But the true nature of the mind completely unites us with all of everything, actually. I mean, not only other living beings, but the whole nature, the whole universe. And that is understood in all genuine spiritual traditions, that we have to go beyond the little me, sitting in the middle like a spider in its web.
Okay. So, Jetsum, you are just telling about we don't remember our past incarnation, but some people say that we remember it. What we can.
Yeah, some people do, but it's not the me of our present life. It's a whole different person. You know, and that is also just endlessly impermanent and changing. It's not something solid and real. Our problem is that we identify with the conceptual thinking mind and we think ourselves as something solid, permanent, unchanging, and you know, it's not like that at all. If you look for this I in the center, you can never find it. But it can open up into something so much more vast than our ordinary conceptual mind can think of. It's the non-conceptual. It goes beyond anything which our ordinary thinking can encompass. We have very, very limited ideas, very, very small. I mean, it's like, you know, associating ourselves with you know, a cloud instead of seeing the sky.
But what you tell about losing our small I, but we see all people are attaching too much to this.
That's why we're in samsara, my friend. That's why we are still here, endlessly revolving round and round and round, because we're attached to the wrong thing. And it's very difficult. Oh, how? Come on, the whole of Buddhism is about how.
So this attachment to this small I, it's always created another, this samsara and other lives and this.
Exactly that, because it's you know, it's like the string in a mala, right? You pull one bead and the other beads come along. What's holding them together is this thread, and the thread is the belief in an actor, in a me that is doing all these actions and receiving the results of these actions. We don't see things how they really are. This is our whole problem. I mean, this ignorance and grasping is at the base of it all. You know, I mean, all genuine spiritual paths understand that we have to go beyond the ego. However, they want to see that. I mean, even in the Sufis, there's all this idea of surrender. You know, it's a very constant theme. In Christianity, likewise. I mean, you know, get rid of this me, you know, this heavy I at the center, and dissolve it into something so much vaster and greater and vivid and clear and luminous, which is our true nature. That's our tragedy, Lewis. Yeah. That's our tragedy, that we cling to what is unreal and don't see the real.
Majority, maybe all people are attached to this tragedy, to this illusionary I. They make all things for this I. They do all things for this I. And every small few people who are aware that this I, one time it will disappear, because even they think that after death there is a life which in this life I will continue, even in another way, but I will continue in another life. It is eternal I.
Yeah, so that's why we're stuck in samsara. Going round and round and round and round and round and not getting anywhere. Up and down, up and down.
Okay.
Caught in a trap.
My second question. You insist that our enemies are momentary, and you say in page 156, the enemies of the moment, namely such a boss who is obsessive, etc. It is up to us to no longer see them at the heart of the problem, but to see them in our heads as gurus who teach us how to acquire patience. Let us thank them. My question, so our enemy come essentially from within ourselves, and it is rather we who see him as the enemy?
Well, you know, usually we blame all our problems on outer circumstances and other people. I can't get him to come.
No. There we go.
Oh, thank you. So the real problem is how we relate to situations which don't please us. I've lost it again. Sorry, I keep losing you, Lewis. It's okay. I'm sorry to lose you. So therefore we become angry or we become depressed. And so instead of that, we can take the difficulties that we meet with, difficult people, difficult situations, and use them, take them on the path. And use them as an opportunity to cultivate wholesome emotions like our patience and our compassion and forbearance and so forth, right? I mean, on the other hand, it doesn't mean that we are naive and we allow others just to abuse us or cheat us, right? It doesn't mean that. Hit me harder, it's good for my patients. Doesn't mean that. But it does mean that we can handle any situation with tolerance and understanding. To be patient and forbearing is not a weakness, it's a strength. When we get angry and upset, that's a weakness, right? So as Jesus said, right, we should love our enemies and we should feel compassion for those who seek to harm us. Then they can never overcome us in spirit, even if they kill us. We are still the victors because we replace hatred with love. And love will always be victorious, even if we die. This is what all the great masters have said, but you know, we don't hear them, isn't it?
So Jetsumna, it is the same teaching then when Jesus said, say love your enemies?
Of course. Of course, because love is the strength. If someone does something bad to us or hates us and we return that with hate, then that they have won, right? Even if we cannot harm them. The fact that we return their negativities with more negativities mean they are the victor. But if we return their negativities with love and positive thinking, then we are the victors. Even if they physically destroy us, they have not destroyed our spirit. That's what Jesus meant.
You are just telling Jetsumna that anger, and we are when we are angry, it is weakness. But people think that anger, it is like war. We anger, it is a power, and it gives a power.
No, because the anger controls us. We are not in control. When people are angry, they do and they say bad things. Their mind is full of fire. That is a weakness. That is not strength. We are completely controlled by our anger, and we do all sorts of things which later we might regret, right? Whereas if instead of being angry, we call up the reserves of our forbearance and understanding and compassion and love, then we are in the strength because we are in control of the situation, not controlled by it.
But people think that anger, it's equal war. When we have anger, we can do war. So we have power.
Well, look what we do. I mean, we're destroying each other. We're destroying the planet. We're destroying everything. And if you think that's wisdom, then what are you thinking? I mean, the way we treat each other, the way we treat other nations, the way we treat other races, the way we treat other religions, it's total delusion. And we cause so much pain and so much suffering to others and often also to ourselves. Where is the wisdom there?
So you think when we have anger, we cannot control ourselves at all? We cannot have anger, the power of anger.
Look at people when they're angry. You know, is that control? They are totally overcome by their feelings, their negative feelings. And then they make very bad karma. They cause suffering to others. They cause suffering to themselves. They mess up everything. They are totally deluded. No, there is no wisdom in anger, not that kind of anger. I mean, the wisdom comes from recognizing the anger and overcoming it through understanding, forbearance, patience, and ultimately through love. As Jesus said. You think we know more than Jesus?
What do you think? What he said exactly about this, Jesus? About anger, you think? You said? What?
Well, he's saying if you don't think of your enemies as enemies, but if you think of them as your friends, then you have no enemies.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 3, you advise to do so that any situation is not unfavorable to us by saying in page 156, in fact, there is nothing to stop us from talking a poisonous situation and making it a real nectar. This is where our free will comes in, the way we act in the face of such and such an event. And my question, it is not quite easy actually. Take the case of a serious illness, for example. How can we transform such a painful situation into a nectar? Does our refusal of a situation that has been inflicted on us make the situation worse?
Well, you know, since you mentioned like a serious illness, then the Buddha said that there are two kinds of suffering, right? There is physical pain, which is unavoidable with a material body. I mean, even the Buddha himself got sick. But there is also mental suffering on account of that pain. Mm-hmm. That is optional. That we have a choice. We can feel sorry for ourselves and indulge in self-pity, right? But that just magnifies the suffering. We lie there feeling sorry for ourselves and miserable because we're suffering. Or we can accept the illness and the pain and make use of that suffering to open up our heart to the suffering of all the others. For example, when we do the practice of Tonglen, where we breathe in others' suffering and we breathe out well-being. So we could be in pain and think, I take in all the pain of all the other beings in the universe who are suffering as I am suffering right now. And I send out healing light for them so that they may be free from pain. I will take all their pain on myself. So, and we just think, wouldn't that be wonderful if my pain could relieve the pain of all other beings? So in this way, we use our own suffering to cultivate our empathy and our compassion. And in that way, we make use of the time instead of just lying there getting sucked in by our self-pity. So again, it's our attitude that counts, not the actual circumstance. I mean, either we feel self-pity or else we develop compassion. It's up to us.
So you think the role and situation of Bodhisattva, it's like also the action of Jesus who take the suffering of others on its own?
Exactly. Exactly. And we can do that. We don't have to be Jesus. Mm-hmm. We can do that, you know, to open up our heart to recognize the interconnection with all beings and the genuine desire to be of benefit to others through our suffering. Definitely.
And in Buddhism, Jesus is a kind of bodhisattva, we can say?
Definitely. He's a very high bodhisattva. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Mike, other question, when we refuse, we should not refuse pain, we should not refuse, yeah, there is some here difference, or people said that we should refuse illness to go beyond or even to cure illness. Otherwise, if you accept this illness, so we will continue in our diseases.
No, I mean, if there is a cure for your sickness, then you take the cure. Why not? I mean, it's not that we luxuriate in suffering, but if suffering is there and unavoidable, then we make use of it. But if it can be avoided, you know, through modern medical treatment or any other kind of way of dealing with it, then we should take that as an opportunity to be free from pain. It's not that pain in itself is necessarily a good thing. I mean, it's not that we should, luxuriate in being suffering. But if we are in that situation and we cannot avoid it, then we make use of it.
Mm-hmm. But as a first attitude, we should accept this.
Well, if you can't get rid of it, then you accept it. The Tibetans have a saying, na 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 ji na ji, which means if you're sick, you're sick, and if you die, you die. And so it's, a lot of our problem when we are sick is that we resist it. We don't like it. We don't want it. And we feel sorry for ourselves. And this adds mental suffering to the already physical suffering. That's what I'm saying. So the physical suffering maybe is unavoidable, but the mental suffering of feeling sorry for ourselves and resisting is what makes it so many more times worse. If we just accept, if we cannot get rid of the suffering, I mean, if there's some pain which are unavoidable, then at least to accept the fact that it's pain, but use that to do meditations on taking on the sufferings of others and empathy with the sufferings of others. Because often in our modern world, we can find antidotes to the pain, but many, many places, there is no antidote to the pain. People are suffering so much worse than we are suffering. I mean, often our suffering is very little compared with what others have to put up with. So we develop compassion and that empathy for the suffering in the world, not just physical, but also mental. Make use of what we've got. That's the idea. Transform it.
Okay. My question number 4, you warn against the continual expectation of positive results from our actions by saying in page 158, you say, we desire to obtain a positive, concrete result from the career we have embraced. But it is the ego that feeds this desire. As long as our practice is driven by our ego and aims at achieving something, it is clear that the result will be zero. My question, we are almost programmed from childhood with this kind of attitude. We take exams at school to pass them, etc. So should we change this attitude and no longer have expectations of success?
Well, I was referring especially to the spiritual path, that we shouldn't practice just with the aim of reaching a goal. This is usually, again, just the ego, right? The ego wants to get something. It wants to get bliss. It wants to get clarity. It wants to get enlightened. How long will it take me before I'm enlightened? People ask, right? So this is what is nowadays called spiritual materialism, right? We're just taking, instead of wanting, to get a promotion in your job, in your firm, you want to get enlightenment in your spiritual practice. So it's really better to do the best we can mindfully, but without looking ahead to the outcome. We just do the best we can and allow whatever to come, it will come. So if we act well in the present moment, if we act skillfully, then the future will take care of itself. In the future, we will likewise be able to act skillfully. So otherwise, we spend so much of our present life just dreaming, and planning for the future. But now is the only time we have. And even that is flowing moment to moment. It's not static. So this is the thing, we shouldn't worry about the future. If we act skillfully in the present, the future will take care of itself. And not to make not to make our spiritual practice again aim orientated, goal orientated, because this is just fueling again our sense of, I have got to achieve something. When am I going to see the results? You know, that's just the ego. It doesn't get rid of the ego.
In fact, in the spiritual path, there is a lot of up and down. So it should not deceive us.
Yeah, so that's why we think of it like, you know, the waves going up and down. And so you need like a boat, which will ride the waves. You know, it might go up and down a bit, but we're not submerged, right? We're balanced on the ups and the downs, and we're not clinging to either. That's the point, especially not clinging to the ups and not depressed by the downs.
It's a real part of this path to be up and down. So,
well, you know, we develop equanimity. Equanimity means that we are able to be balanced. I mean, sometimes things go well and we get wonderful experiences, and then suddenly we get through a very dry patch, or even, you know, as St. John says, the dark night of the soul. And just to keep going and not to be, thrown off our balance by all of that. That's the important thing. Never give up.
Okay. Jitsumna, my question number 5, talking about the positive effects of mindfulness. You say in page 160. In fact, simple mindfulness soothes the mind, calms it, comforts it, and awakens it. There is no need to modify it. It will do so on its own. And my question, so does this simple awareness have the power to change negative thoughts and emotions?
I would say yes. It can change negative states of mind and emotions simply by being aware of them as they arise, right? If we can recognize the states of our mind immediately in the moment of arising, then that seeing will of itself dissolve it, right? But the problem is that usually we are not aware until these negative states of mind have already taken over the mind, right? In that case, we need to apply an antidote, such as patience for anger and so on, right? If we see that the anger as it arises in that moment, that second of seeing it the moment it arises, then it will dissolve. But normally by the time we've realized we're angry, it's already way down the road. And it's like galloping horses, very difficult to stop. So that's when we need to really put on the brakes and apply an antidote like patience and so forth. So that's why it is so important to cultivate the ability to observe our mind stream, all our thoughts and emotions as much as we can throughout the day, right? To really be aware so that we are never overcome by our negative states. But usually, we are so distracted that anything can come up and we don't even notice it until it's taken over. So this is why mindfulness of the mind is very important at all times, as much as we can.
Okay. In the same context of mindfulness, you teach that mindfulness, my question number 6, should be developed in daily life by saying in page 166, many people with no spiritual or religious training manage to develop mindfulness in daily life, whereas Dharma practitioners fail to do so because they are convinced that it is only by practicing while sitting on a cushion. My question, So what role does meditation and daily life have in the development of mindfulness?
Well, of course, first we need to cultivate the ability to be mindful and not distracted while sitting on our cushion and observing, for example, the breath. Now, we breathe out, we breathe in, and we know we are breathing out and breathing in. This trains our attention and then gradually allows the background chatter in our mind to calm down. And then as our mindfulness becomes stronger, it becomes more and more effortless and natural. You know, in the beginning, we have to make an effort to remember. But as time goes on, as with any practice, it becomes more fluent and more effortless. So then we are able to maintain our awareness even during our daily life. But sitting practice is also very important because it recharges our batteries and helps us to really begin to learn how to be aware. But the Buddha himself said that we should be aware in the 4 postures of standing, walking, sitting, and lying down. In other words, not just aware of the mind, but also aware of our movement, of our action, when we're drinking tea, when we're talking, when we're walking, when whatever we're doing, we should be present in the moment and not thinking in the past or running off into the future or just, you know, chattering to ourselves in the present.
But you are just talking about to be aware how these thoughts they arise. So how we can be aware of the origin of our thoughts?
Of course. I mean, the problem is that normally we are swept along by our thoughts. I say this again and again. It's like a river. Normally we are immersed in the river and swept along by the river, so that we have to learn how to sit on the banks of the river. We don't dam the river. We don't stop the thoughts, but we step out of the conceptual thinking mind and observe the thoughts. We can do that, of course. So then we are much more in becoming slowly the masters of our mind instead of, you know, the usual slaves of our mind, just doing whatever thoughts and feelings come up. We're swept along by them. Now we can step back, see those thoughts which are skillful, those thoughts which are unskillful, and we can be in charge of the situation. And we realize that we are not our thoughts, because if we were our thoughts, we wouldn't be able to observe them.
That's what you name ability to be in mindfulness, watching thoughts like a river.
And our movements, our body, being aware of our speech, just being present and conscious of what's going on instead of endlessly commentating and talking to ourselves.
And you are just telling that meditation is a charge of our batteries. So it is a new energy. From where we got this new energy to charging our battery?
Because we are becoming more concentrated, more attentive, more aware, more conscious. And we're not being lost in all our endless debilitating thinking and emotions, which just carry on without any kind of direction at all. I mean, you know, really, if we had loudspeakers attached to our brain and people could hear what we were thinking, then we would be a little bit more careful about what we're thinking, a bit more aware.
And people say that some people can read our thoughts. Is it real, you think?
Maybe they can. In that case, I think they must have great compassion, because they look at their average mind and think, oh.
It is so fatigued to read the thoughts of others.
Yeah, it's bad enough looking at our own mind, looking at other people's minds.
Jetsumna, my question number 7. You talk about the cause and origin of boredom by saying in page 160, you say, in fact, things in themselves are not boring. It is the mind based on the ego that is the source of boredom. And the expression, I am a victim of the boredom I create for myself, indeed, there is some truth to it. My question, so the boredom that is often called the evil of the century is simply a creation of ourselves, and how we can realize it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, we become bored because our mind is not really paying attention. You know, the French, you say, je m'ennuie, right?
Oui, je
I
m'ennuie.
bore myself. Well, that's really true, right? Well, nobody else is boring us. We bore ourselves. So a scientist, for example, might concentrate on his equipment for hours with deep attention, but he does not become bored, right? Nothing really is happening, and yet his attention is so clear that he is completely alive to what he is seeing, and he's not bored in the least. But on the other hand, we might be surrounded by all sorts of lights and action and yet feel totally fed up, right? So in nature, nothing much is happening, but we can feel rested and revitalized if we go out into nature and just sit quietly, looking at a tree, looking at the flowers, looking at the sky. Nothing is happening, but we don't feel bored. We feel rested, we feel relaxed, we feel renovated by it, right? So it's our attitude. It's our attitude to what is happening that really counts, not what is happening. It's how we sit. We can also observe our boredom, right? If we feel bored, we can look at that. And in that way, we also learn a lot about our mind. So the other question is, why do we always want to be entertained, right? Breathing in, breathing out. That can either be the most fascinating thing in the world, or it can be the most boring. But if we allow our mind to rest in awareness, then we are never bored.
But you are just talking about our attitude to what is happening. So we should accept what is happening, whatever.
Well, if we give attention to what is happening, and if we're clearly present with what is happening in that moment, then that is never boring. It's that we lose attention, and the attention sinks, and then the mind feels, you know, fed up, and you know, it's very much a matter of our attitude, not of what's actually happening. We can be in isolation with nothing happening at all, like in a sense deprivation tank. And far from being the most boring thing that anybody has ever done, it can be the most fascinating thing that people want to go back again and again. You know, when you can't see, you can't hear, you can't feel anything, you know, in these sense deprivation tanks. Many people feel themselves totally coming alive and awake, sometimes for the first time in their life. Isn't that interesting? They don't get bored.
And some gurus, teachers of Vedanta said, teach yourself to say always, oh yes, and not oh no, if you even, whatever is the event, the external event.
Why not? Accept. Yeah, accept. I mean, if we're always in denial, then again, we're going to feel depressed and dispirited, right? But if we accept whatever is, then we, you know, we have an open, interested attitude to whatever is happening.
This is
It depends on our mind. All of this depends on our attitude and our mind. But we don't do anything to train the mind, to teach the mind how to live properly.
You think our attitude for opening the mind should be to accept whatever is coming?
Well, at the moment, that's what's happening. So we have to accept it. If we deny it, it doesn't stop it happening. But we just feel resentful and miserable and angry and depressed and, you know, those very negative states. Whereas if we accept everything and then we can deal with it skillfully.
Okay. Sumna, my question number 8. You advise to transform disturbing emotions into opportunities by saying in page 164, the so-called disturbing emotions, these imperfections in our nature, are not obstacles, but real opportunities for our practice. My question, how can an emotion such as fear or greed be an opportunity?
Okay, so first, again, we have to be aware of these emotions. Usually we cover them up. We're not even conscious of them and we don't recognize them, right? Whether it's fear, which we push down, or greed, which we just follow along with. We're not, you know, now fear may be the result of real danger, right? In which case, of course, it's a warning signal to take care, right? Nature gives all living beings this signal for self-preservation, right? There's danger, watch out. If there's real danger, then of course we must act appropriately. I mean, it doesn't mean we're stupid, right? If there's real danger, we do something. However, some people, as you know, live in anxiety continuously without any real cause, right? Some people have fear arise when they try to meditate. As soon as they sit down, instead of feeling calm and clear, fear arises in them, right? This is a very common thing in meditation, that people have this fear coming up. In that case, it's much better to allow the fear, the feeling of the fear to come up and then say, hello, fear, what's your problem? Right? Tell me about it. Listen to the fear and have compassion for the fear, like a frightened child, right? So often these fears are something which are very deep inside our psyche, maybe from childhood, maybe from a pre-verbal time in our life, right? So they come up and normally we push them back down. So they're in the darkness. Now we bring them up into the light and we're looking at them and we're listening to them and we're trying to accept these feelings, right? Instead of repressing them and allowing them into the light of our awareness. So then they can gradually dissolve. I mean, a lot of things which we fear, if we face them kindly, they can transform into something positive. You know, Lewis, there's this video clip about this woman who goes in the ocean and she meets with sharks, because normally we see a shark and we see it as something frightening, you know, and we're trying to escape from. She goes to the sharks and she puts her whole arm into the mouth of the shark to remove the hook from the shark's throat, which it's gotten from fishermen, you know, who put in the hooks, and then the shark gets away, but the hook is inside it, and so it's suffering very much. And so she goes to the shark and she puts her arm right into the shark's mouth and she pulls out the hook. She has apparently pulled out more than 300 hooks from these sharks. And all around her are sharks waiting for her to help them. So in other words, like the most fearful, frightening thing that you think about in swimming in an ocean is to meet a shark. And she has turned that right round. And she's made friends with the sharks. And then the sharks would never harm her. They look on her as their salvation. So this is how we should look on these fears and negative emotions which come up. We should embrace them with love and want to help them. And then what looks like something like an enemy becomes a friend. So this is the point with fear and anger and all these negative emotions which come up, to befriend them and bring them to the light of our awareness with love. And then they dissolve themselves. However, greed is something else. Greed is a very deep psychological toxic state that's difficult to eradicate. We want to get rid of anger, right? We want to get rid of fear. We don't like that. But on the whole, when it comes to greed, we like it, right? And we don't see any danger. This is the problem. But Buddha said that greed is like salty water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. And he also said that our clinging attachment is the cause of our suffering. We think that being attached and grasping tightly is the cause of our security and happiness. We don't see it's the cause of our suffering. So therefore, to enjoy something in itself is not the problem, right? It doesn't mean you can't enjoy anything. As long as we don't cling and we have what you could call a non-stick mind, right? A Teflon mind. Nothing sticks to that. So, but wanting more and more and thinking that this will bring a satisfaction, you know, this is the problem, right? It's a delusion. And it's, you know, as you can see, it's destroying our whole planet as our desires become greater and greater and greater, and they're never fulfilled because it's like a black hole. You know, however much you put in, it will never give us total satisfaction. So that's why it's very important to cultivate contentment and gratitude, appreciation, and generosity, right? To reverse this I want mindset, which we all have, thinking that the more we get, the happier we will be, because that is simply not true. And contentment is a much deeper source of genuine happiness.
So as a general rules for emotions like fear, we should let these emotions express themselves in.
We sit quietly, we get our mind quietened down, calm, aware, and then whatever feelings come up, instead of pushing them back down, wanting to get rid of them, we welcome them and say, hello, what is it? Tell me, where in the body are you feeling this emotion? What is this trying to tell us? And instead of being afraid of it, we should befriend it and listen what it's telling us, not us trying to dominate it, but allowing it to express itself, because usually it's pushed down and it grows in the darkness. If you bring it into the light of our awareness, gradually it dissolves. We don't have to do anything except be open and receptive and accepting.
So, okay, we tell them hello, but at some times we should not tell them goodbye also?
They will go of themselves. If we welcome them and accept them of themselves, they will transform. It takes time. It takes time, but it helps them not to go back down into the undergrowth again. You know, it allows the all to come up and into the open, and then they of themselves, you know, like black clouds, you know, when the sun comes up, then they just dissolve. Where's the black cloud gone? But it's gone.
So by their nature, they will go, they will.
If we accept them in friendship, I mean, I don't say immediately, but gradually they will begin to just evaporate because they're not real. They're not real. I mean, they're like the clouds, right? They come because of causes and conditions, but when those causes and conditions cease, they also will disappear.
Okay. Sometimes you say that they are like waves. So they are so quick in coming and going back like waves.
They wave up and down, but the important thing is not to repress them again. This is the point, but to in a meditative state. During the day, of course, we have to be careful, but during our formal practice, when feelings come up, not to deny them or to classify them, but to observe them with an open, spacious awareness and a sense of kindness, because they also are suffering, right? They cause suffering.
Okay. Jitsumna, my question number 9. You often repeat the following advice in page 167. You say, we must look at ourselves inwardly without judgment and with objectivity, and this by striving to gradually become masters of our mind. My question, to be masters of our mind, we must not judge our thoughts or our actions.
So there are two things here, Lwiis. During our formal sitting practice, we should just view our thoughts and emotions as simply thoughts and emotions, fleeting impulses of mental energy and empty in their nature, right? We don't have to solidify them and judge them. But during, whether it's a stupid thought or an intelligent thought, it's just a thought. Let them just go. But during the day, during our daily life, not in our formal sitting practice, we should be aware of our thoughts and then notice any negative thoughts. So then we notice if we get angry or irritated by something, for example, we recognize it, we accept that, and then we release it, we let it go. In other words, we don't follow it. And meanwhile, we try to cultivate any positive thoughts we have, right? We encourage them. So in that way, by recognizing and releasing our negative thoughts and cultivating and encouraging our positive thoughts, we become the masters of our mind instead of the slaves, because we decide what's going to go on in our mind. We don't leave it to the mind to make its own decisions about what it wants to think.
You are just distinguishing between two states, when in meditation and in our also daily life.
Daily life, yeah.
In fact, the procedure of thoughts is the same, no?
Yes,
meditation.
But how we respond to them is different. How we respond. When we are sitting in formal practice, then at that time we are bringing insight into realizing that thoughts are just thoughts. And that we are not following them anyway, because we're just observing them. And so if negative thoughts arise or positive thoughts arise, we just see them as thoughts. We don't judge them or try to get rid of them or encourage them. But during the day, practically speaking, then we should be aware of negative thinking. And because negative thinking then will be often followed by negative speech and negative actions. Okay. So we don't want that, right? So during the day, we are conscious. We see that, oh, that's a negative thought. And then we accept that that's a negative thought, but then we release it. We don't follow it. We don't add fuel to the fire.
Okay. But sometimes when in our daily life, when we try to push negative thoughts, they come back. We push and they come back.
Well, that's because we're not releasing them. We're just suppressing them.
So
and even if they come back, you know, we let them go again. We just let them go. Just let go, let go, let go. We don't follow it. I mean, the point is not to add fuel.
So we recognize
and
that
we can also smile at our negative thoughts. You know, and not take them too seriously. Oh, there it comes again. And we can laugh at it. And negative thinking doesn't like to be laughed at. It likes to be taken seriously. So if we smile at it and laugh to ourselves, then it runs away because it doesn't like to be made fun of. It takes itself very seriously.
Yeah, it was the advice of Jalaluddin Rumi. Don't take your thoughts as serious.
Exactly.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 10. And in the same context, you criticize the guilt we often feel about our actions that we consider wrong, and you say, in page 177, it is the ego that makes us fixate on bad guilt. The nature of the mind is never, ever damaged by what we have done. It is at most superficially tarnished. Regretting indefinitely is a form of ego. Let go. My question, rather we are religiously and socially educated to recognize our faults and sins, so as not to repeat them. So is it a bad habit, what we are educated on it?
Well, I mean, it's a question of guilt. You know, guilt comes from a religious teaching that somehow we're offending God by our negative actions. But, you know, honestly and truthfully, could God ever be offended? Isn't he supposed to be the very nature of love, right? Anyway, when we do negative actions in the past or the present, we should feel remorse, we should feel regret, and then promise not to do like that in the future as much as we can. That's as much as we can do. So we can try to make reparation where it's suitable, but to endlessly go over and over and over past mistakes is like scratching at a wound. You know, you're just making it worse. It's just going to fester at the end of it. We need to heal it, right? Just always regretting the same thing again and again. I'm sorry, I did that. Well, I will try not to do that in the future. Let it go, right? So anyway, we're going to receive the karmic results of our actions. In the meantime, cultivate good and forgive yourself, just as we are supposed to forgive others, right? It's very important to forgive ourselves and make friends with ourselves and not endlessly be beating ourselves up. Beating ourselves up is just the ego enjoying being miserable.
But people sometimes are victim of their past. If the past is not a good past, they have done a lot of bad action. They are always victims of these actions. And
well, you know, again, as I say, you know, we regret what we did. And if you want, you can do purificatory practices. But in the whole, we have to forgive ourselves. And that releases a lot of energy, which otherwise is trapped in endless cycles of remorse and regret, which don't help at all. It doesn't help.
We have to forgive ourselves like we forgive the others.
Exactly. I mean, we are ignorant beings and we act ignorantly. And even if we did something very terrible, we can feel really sorry we did that promise not to do that again in the future. I really feel sorry, but let it go and get on with life. Release it. Don't keep holding to that. Forgive ourselves, of course. First thing we have to do is learn to forgive ourselves. However stupid we may have been in the past, we forgive. Just as we would want others to forgive us, just as in theistic religions you would want God to forgive you. Don't you believe he could forgive you?
We start by forgiving ourselves to.
We have to forgive ourselves. Otherwise, we are always going to suffer. And what for? Doesn't help.
Okay.
It doesn't mean, forgiving doesn't mean condoning. Right? I mean, if we did something bad, we have to accept it was something really bad. And it was bad, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to endlessly hate ourselves because we did that. We did that because we were overwhelmed by negative emotions and our ignorance, and now we're sorry and let it go. That's it. We have to embrace ourselves, just as you would a small child who did something really bad, but it was because of their ignorance.
Question number 11, Jetsumna. You repeat the words of the Buddha who says in page 170, what I think, I say, and what I say, I do. This is what I can say about myself. The question is, so should we say everything and divulge everything and leave nothing secret to ourselves? And what can we say about the masters who keep their teaching or a good part of its secret?
No, I think what the Buddha meant, Lwiis, was that he had integrity. He didn't say one thing and then do another. So we can trust him, right? Teachers can speak and they can preach very good and ethical principles, but themselves fall short in their conduct. So they're hypocrites, right? They're not people of integrity who we can rely on. So what the Buddha was saying was that he is all of one piece. What he's thinking, he's saying, what he's saying, he's actually doing, and therefore we can trust him.
But what about the sacred teaching?
Well, that's something different. That's nothing to do with that. That's nothing to do with that. I mean, certain teachings are secret because people would misuse them if they got them too soon. I mean, you don't teach quantum physics to someone who can't even add up 2 and 2.
So there is a degrees, different steps of teaching.
Of course. And it wouldn't be helpful. I mean, there are certain things which should only be revealed at a certain time due to the maturity of the student. And if they get it too soon, they'll misuse it and not understand it and harm themselves and others. So therefore, that's kept quiet until they're ready. But that's something different. I mean, the Buddha was just talking about his own personal integrity and that we could trust him.
Okay. My question number 12, Jetsumna. Comparing modern astronomical knowledge and traditional Buddhist knowledge, you say in page 195, not everyone has to believe that the earth is flat, that it has 4 continents, and that Mount Meru is there. The earth is flat, the earth is round, whatever it is empty. The question, doesn't the astronomical knowledge of the universe, which has evolved enormously nowadays, have an effect on our personal evolution and personal path?
Actually, not really. People, despite everything, are still angry, still greedy, still deluded, still kind and compassionate, depending on the occasion as it meets them. We're still busy destroying our planet, even though we don't know of any other planet comparable that we could go to. The astrologers still argue and are petty-minded, despite all their great knowledge of the infinite vastness of the universe. I mean, as human beings, we haven't really evolved that much. So what that we know about billions and billions of world systems, that help us any better in our relationships? Actually not.
It cannot help us to have some other maybe conception of God and universe and the creation of universe.
It usually doesn't, unless people really sit and think about it. They still have their idea of God as somebody personal who is really fascinated by all their little, indiscretions and problems and things like this, even though he must be a God who is in charge of zillions and zillions of countless universes. Why would he care about what I do? It doesn't make them better people or kinder people or worse people. I mean, it's all just conceptual, theoretical knowledge. It doesn't really deal with people's moment-to-moment conduct. So, I mean, these brilliant scientists are still people who get angry, get upset, get greedy, get jealous, get competitive and ambitious, just the same as an ordinary person who thinks the world is flat and Mount Meriah is in the center. We haven't really evolved very much in our psychological response to life.
But when we said it is all empty, even the universe are empty in this meaning?
Well, empty means that there's nothing in it that you can pinpoint and say that it is self-existent from its own side. But that's all part of Buddhist philosophy. Let's not go into it right now. But there's nothing solid at the end of the day. You can never find anything which exists from itself, independently of everything else. Everything is interdependent and interconnected. The shorthand term for that is that it's empty, but it means empty of inherent existence. So whether you're dealing with a pinpoint or whether you're dealing with a vast universe, it's all essentially empty.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 13, speaking about friends, you quote the Buddha who says in page 216, only good true companions are those who help to progress on the path, those who inspire confidence, those who are positive, who cultivate righteousness. And my question, often we are forced to have companions or friends who do not share our goals and who are rather materialistic and selfish. Should we therefore avoid such friends?
Well, of course, we should be friendly to everybody. I mean, it's not that we discriminate, those who agree with us and those who don't. However, we are very influenced by the company that we keep. And so we should be a little careful and try to spend more time with people who share our ideas and values, right? And inspire the best in us, not the worst. So this is why the Buddha praised good companionship, because we are very influenced by those around us who, if they have bad habits, if we hang out with them all the time, we're likely to pick up their habits too. And so we should be careful. But of course, we're friendly to everybody. It's not that we, ignore people that we don't agree with or who we think have wrong livelihood.
But how we can protect ourselves when we are we have a lot of bad friends or we are forced.
Be mindful, Lwiis. Be mindful.
Okay.
Really, mindfulness is the key to so much. And it's a great protection for the mind.
So mindful is the key of solutions for all our situations.
Most of it, if we're really, really aware, mindfully aware and present and really conscious of what's happening, then that protects us from so much.
And natural
it is a natural protection which we really should really call to mind, literally.
It is also a protection against all this bad emotions or negative emotions.
Well, as if we recognize them as they come up, then of themselves, as I say, they evolve, they disappear. It's because we don't notice them that they take a firm root and then sweep us along. But if at the moment when they first arise, we recognize it because we are very clear and mindful, then they have no foot on which to plant themselves. And so they just slide away, they disappear.
They are empty, you think, this bad emotions?
Of course. Oh, absolutely. Totally. All our thoughts and emotions are empty. They're like bubbles. They look very bright and solid and real, but click, they're empty.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 14, you talk about the use of pendulums in your convent. Say in page 219, it was our custom in our community of nuns to test our foods with pendulum. When we tested out of curiosity organic products, the pendulum would swing around enthusiastic way, it seemed. My question, many people consider this kind of practice a kind of magic, or at least unscientific. What do you think about?
Well, actually, it's quite intriguing how the pendulum can pick up on the right answers to things which one couldn't possibly know, even for the future. I mean, we have to be careful we don't influence it with our own thinking. But I mean, actually, sometimes it comes up with quite extraordinary, we couldn't possibly know, and it knows. But I mean, on the other hand, there's so much going on in the world which we don't understand, which we have no answers to. And then we call it magic. But, magic is just a word, right? And magic is neither good nor bad. I mean, it depends what you use it for, right? Anyway, yeah, I mean, it's very interesting how pendulums do work. There's a whole lot more going on than ordinary science has yet caught up with. Although science itself is exploring these things, and it's expanding its paradigms significantly nowadays. I mean, in all sorts of things, which, things like MIT and these are investigating these things which have no logical, rational explanation yet actually exist. Who knows? We know so little, really. Our knowledge is still so materialistically bound that anything which goes beyond the material, we still don't know what's going on there. But it's fascinating, actually.
You are just telling Jetsumna that magic is not good or bad by itself, but people, they say there is black magic, which is
and there's white magic.
And white magic. Is it good?
Yeah. Magic is just a word which we use to cover certain natural laws which we don't understand yet. That's all. I mean, it's just a word. We don't know what it is, so we say it must be magic, right? That
it is a kind of cities of powers, a magical.
Well, it's some kind of law, natural law, but we don't know what it is because you can't test it on a machine. So therefore we say it doesn't exist or that it's magic, right? It just means we're ignorant. We don't know.
Mhm. My question number 15, Jetsumna, about the importance of a healthy relationship with our mind. You say in page 278, the authentic Buddhist path is the path where we learn how to establish and maintain a healthy relationship with our mind. My question, what is a healthy relationship with our mind?
Well, I mean, I would say it's having a mind which is calm, clear, kind, compassionate, a mind that's non-distracted, relaxed, spacious, effortlessly aware of itself, a mind that recognizes our perception of seeming external reality is really just, as the neuroscientists say, a controlled hallucination. And it's not caught up in grasping and aversion. A liberated mind that is non-dual awareness, which is luminous clarity, open emptiness of knowing presence, interconnecting ourselves with everything instead of dividing ourselves. So if we are in a state which is calm and clear and interconnected, not dominated by the ego, then that is a very healthy mind. That's our true nature, but unfortunately, normally we are rather sick.
Yeah. If you people, maybe they have this mind, clear mind and healthy mind, no?
Well, this is why we practice. This is why we keep ethics. This is why we meditate. This is why we study and we think and we contemplate and we try to cultivate our mindful awareness and the goodness in ourselves. I mean, it's all a training, isn't it? It's all a practice to become more and more healthy, just as you make your body healthy by eating good food, healthy food, having healthy exercise, and taking care of yourself. So we should also take care of our mind and feed our mind with good thoughts instead of junk, and exercise the mind through clarity and through meditation. Then you get a healthy mind, just as you would get a healthy body. But if you eat junk food and you don't exercise, then you're going to get sick. And the mind gets sick because we imbibe all this junk and all this very negative information coming from the media and from the things we read and things we watch. And we don't do anything to clear the mind and clean the mind. And so we end up with a very sick mind.
You are just talking about information coming from the media, but it is always, we have a lot of information. So we should
mostly negative, because the media wants to sell itself. And people are interested in bad news. They're not interested in the goodness. Yeah. So why watch it?
So better to be isolated from this.
Yeah, I mean, you can at least create boundaries, right? So much, but people spend all their time looking and reading and watching the news. And, it's not even true, the news. Often it's very slanted. It's propaganda. They tell you what they want you to hear, and they won't tell you what they don't want you to hear. So, you're not even listening to the truth. And mostly it's very negative. Why fill your mind with that? Doesn't help that situation, doesn't help your mind. So if we want to have a healthy mind, we have to feed it with something which will make it healthy. just as we feed our body with food which we hope will make us healthy.
So like what this food of the mind, healthy mind, to have healthy mind.
Read the great philosophers, read the great saints, read the great literature, and fill the mind with positive thinking, useful thinking, things which cultivate the goodness in us instead of the fear and anxiety and anger and hatred and, you know, all the negativities which our media is feeding us with. Why?
Yeah, they are always nourishing this kind of hatred, of anger in the media, on fears, mostly.
Yeah, of course. Because if you're paranoid and fearful, you can be controlled.
Okay. Jetsumna, my question number 16. In the same context, you say in page 289, we live with and in our mind. So our only way to liberate ourselves is to understand this mind well. And the best way to do that is not by the intellect, but by the direct experience. And my question, so it is by trial and error, trying and trying again, that we come to understand our mind?
No. I would say it is by disciplined meditation on the nature of the mind. It's not a hit and miss affair of the distracted mind. We do not understand the mind because we do not know how to observe the mind. But observing the mind is meditation and the cultivation of mindful awareness. That's how we get to understand the mind, by looking at it.
We can look to our mind face to face like that, or we should use something to...
We observe it. We cultivate the ability to be aware, to be conscious, to be present. Awareness is a faculty of the mind which normally we are not aware of. So we become aware of being aware, and we use that awareness to observe the flow of our thoughts and emotions without being absorbed in the thoughts and emotions. As I say, like someone watching the river going by without being in the river. Because we live in our thoughts and we think we're our thoughts, and we are not our thoughts. We have thoughts, but that is not our true nature.
So that fear, which we have on our thought, or in fact on our mind, also it's a kind of this illusion, or when we have fear, to look to our mind.
If you fear to look to the mind, then you would ask yourself, what are you afraid of?
Like, okay. My last question, Tsumna, still explaining the work of the mind, you say in page 291, it is our mind which is at the origin of this spectacle, of this film, which never ends. It is our mind that projects out of us what we believe to be our states of mind and our most diverse thoughts. And the question, so our mind is playing a game on us. Does it deceive us?
So I thought, Lwiis, that we would finish with the words of neuroscientists, right? These are not my words. These are the words of modern neuroscientists, right? He's saying, remember that your brain is a deaf, blind thing sitting in your cranium, doing its level best to create a model of reality that will enable you to interact with your surroundings in a way that keeps you alive. It doesn't know reality. It's just guessing. Consciousness is primary and creates our perception of a seemingly material reality. Consciousness created the brain icon. The brain icon does not create consciousness. At the deepest level of our being, it is impossible to die. Our perception of the world offers us not a literal transcription of reality, but rather a seamless illusion woven from both the data of our senses and the models in our memories. Normal waking consciousness feels perfectly transparent, and yet it is less a window on reality than a product of our imagination, a kind of controlled hallucination. So that's modern science. We project our own reality. What we actually perceive is not what is actually there. One neuroscience psychologist said 80% of fibers to that part of the brain processing visual imagery comes from the cortex in the brain, which governs functions, including memory. Only 20% comes from the retinas of our eyes. Our eyes may receive an image of furry moving fragments, but we think we see a dog. We think we see a poodle. We carry in our heads predictive hypotheses of the external world, of objects and ourselves. These brain-based hypotheses of perception are our most immediate reality. So experience is but indirectly related to any external reality, right? The point is that we don't really know what's going on outside. We only know the picture which our brain comes up with, which is its closest inference to what is actually happening out there. So really, you know, the important thing is to know our mind.
Okay.
Because everything comes from the mind, including what seems to be our external reality.
Okay.
So my love, you cultivate awareness, right?
Yeah, thanks a lot. And if you have a final word, and also we'll ask Dr. Jacqueline to appear, and maybe he will tell you some goodbye also. Dr. Jacqueline.
Yes, oui, je suis là.
So what do you have? It is our last review with Zetsumna, and maybe you have something to tell her or to tell us.
Well, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, the important thing is to cultivate a good heart. So that is what we all need to do, cultivate a good heart. If the world would only do that much, it would be a very different world.
Okay. Dr. Jacqueline, are you hearing us?
Oui, oui, I hear you. I hear you.
Do you have something to tell before?
I wanted to tell to Jetsunma that now I will be very interested if she does a book with what she says to monks and nuns.
Of course, whatever you think is good.
Okay.
And enjoy the rest of your time in Madhya Pradesh.
Thank you. I'm working regularly. That's nice, and resting also.
Maybe also if some others want to tell something before that Jetsumna leave us. it is our last interview with her.
Thank you very
Vous
much.
pouvez ouvrir vos vidéos aussi.
Thank you very much.
Our-
All our
Lwiis,
thanks, yes.
Tetuma, and Jacques. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Lwiis, very much for all your questions, for reading through the book, and for coming up with such insightful questions, and for all your efforts you've made to make this a genuine conversation, which has some meaning, hopefully, in our lives. So thank you very much, really. Thank you.
Yes, and Tenzin Palmo, we have already transcribed until interview 10, and we will finish 2 other ones. So it will be in French, English, and Lwiis is translating into Arabic, which is quite a work also, but important for the rapport, definitely.
Well, thank you all anyway, really. I mean, we've now gone through 12 sessions, which is something. Om Shanti, 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 indeed. Sadhu, 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 as we say. And thank you all for listening. And I hope that something in that, all of this has had some help for you, really. I mean, you know, blah, 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 but something there, which was, oh yes, right, quite right. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thanks for you.
I can't close it. Why not?
Stay more for us. Voilà.